Welcome to the Agronomy and Farm Management Podcast. I'm Amanda.
And I'm Elizabeth. Thanks for joining us today.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Agronomy and Farm Management Podcast. Today, we are focusing on diseases. As you can imagine, with the weather that we've had, it's been on a lot of people's minds. So, we're going to talk about what we're actually seeing, is how the weather's impacting our corn crop specifically, and dive in a little bit to tar spot, which has been on a lot of farmers' minds. And to do that, we have Dr. Stephanie Karhoff with us. Welcome, Stephanie.
Thanks, Amanda. Thanks, Elizabeth. Happy to be on the podcast today.
You actually did a podcast with us, I think back in last August, episode 123 on tar spot. We talked a lot about what this disease is, still trying to get the word out about it. So if our listeners want some more background than what we cover today, you can go listen to that one. But why don't you talk a little bit about where we've been since then, and give us some background pertinent to today?
Thanks, Amanda. So tar spot's still relatively new for us in Ohio and the Midwest at large. So came into Ohio tail end of the 2018 season, and since then has really expanded to all 88 counties. Right now in my scouting, I'm just seeing the very start of tar spot in the fields. And so right now is a good time to be looking for those tiny raised black bumps. And that's the fungal structure itself that's going to produce spores. And a quick test just to distinguish it from other things you may see in the field this time of year is to actually scratch that leaf surface. And if that black mark rubs off, comes off, it's not tar spot. So tar spot, those stromata, those tiny raised black bumps, those are going to be actually embedded into that leaf surface, so they can't be scratched off.
That's helpful. I know sometimes I see stuff and I get a little excited, but then when I touch it and find out, I think last year you told us it's bug poop most likely if it comes off. So I get a little grossed out when I realize I'm actually touching poop instead of tar spot. This year, I think the discussion around tar spot is getting really interesting because I know, Steph, you were on this email as well. Aaron, who was our guest last episode, gave us a weather update, letting us know that since June 1st, we've had nearly 800 hours where the dew point was above 65 degrees Fahrenheit. So that was, I think he said 65% of our time since June 1st. And we've had quite a bit of time where it's been over even 70 degrees. So we can feel that. It's been a muggy summer so far, and we know that that humid and hot environment can be somewhat conducive to these diseases coming in. So I think maybe the bright spot you'll share with us is tar spot, I think tends to prefer those cooler temperatures, but the humidity is still the same.
Absolutely. The humidity really plays a role in a lot of these corn diseases, not just tar spot. So tar spot really likes it when it's more than 75% humidity, which, like Aaron mentioned, I think has been the entire summer in Ohio. At least in my experience walking fields so far. And then outside of humidity, that tar spot fungus prefers that moderate temperature range. So think 60 to 70 degree Fahrenheit. Phylochoromatus, the tar spot fungus, and we very much prefer the same environment. So cool temperatures and high relative humidity, and then that leaf wetness of about 7 to 8 hours. When you have all of those at play in a susceptible hybrid, that's when we can start seeing tar spot.
Yeah, I think the wetness has definitely been there. I think maybe what's holding it off, because I haven't personally seen it in the fields I've scouted this far. So hopefully the temperatures are holding it off. But as we move later into August and September, we know those temperatures start to drop off, and that's when we usually see tar spots start to explode across the state. So chances are still in its favor, probably.
Absolutely. Like looking to the next 7 day forecast, we start getting those cooler temperatures after some rainfall. And that's where it'll be interesting to see if tar spot does start developing more, especially in those later planted cornfields that we do have across the state. And a nice tool that's available if you're trying to factor in how is the weather going to impact that disease risk, and when do I need to actually go out and scout fields? Because realistically, we can't be in every field every day looking for that disease. So there is a disease forecasting system, and it lives on the Crop Protection Network site, and it's the crop risk tool. And this is your one-stop shop for multiple crops, multiple disease forecasting models. And included in that is one for corn and tar spot. So you just enter in your GPS location, either manually clicking on the map or uploading a CSV file with your GPS address. And then it's going to combine that site specific weather information along with everything we know about this pathogen. And it's going to give you, a low, medium, high risk forecast of tar spot occurring in that field. So that can be helpful in years like this where it does seem like it's coming in maybe slightly later. And we have so many variable planting dates that it's a lot to manage on the grower end for sure.
So my understanding is that disease requires moisture for it to spread from the plant. So it's not so much about how much rain you get overall, but yeah, how many rain intervals, or like you mentioned, that foggy weather where it's staying really damp and moist. That's what allows the disease to spread. Is that correct?
That's, yeah, correct. So those black raised bumps that we talked about at the early part of the podcast episode, that's the fungus, those stromata. And when you have those humid, wet conditions from that stromata, that's when the spores can start oozing out. So they need that leaf wetness for those spores to really disperse and then start infecting other plants in the field, or carry via the wind to spread to a neighboring field. So they need that leaf wetness period. Too much can sometimes inhibit some of those spores being developed and dispersed. So it has to be that sweet spot, it seems. But we definitely have it this year in a lot of fields.
So if someone is concerned or is finding it, what are your management recommendations for actions they can take to mitigate their yield risk right now?
So, like any good extension specialist, it depends. So the biggest determinant is going to be what growth stage is your field at, and that's going to determine what tools are still available to us. So if we are entering tasseling, silking, but haven't gone past R3, that's the nice window for a fungicide application. So typically a single application of a multiple mode of action product is going to be most consistently effective against tar spot. And it does seem like timing is really dependent on when disease starts in that field. So tar spot can be difficult to manage, in my opinion, just because it varies from one season to the next on how late it comes in. And it can really take off in those later maturing cornfields. So it just loves it when that plant starts drying down, it really takes off. But that single mode or multiple mode of action, single application between BT and R3 is going to be the most consistently effective in managing that tar spot. And then looking to the next season, really working with your seed supplier to select a resistant hybrid. So nothing's 100% resistant to tar spot. And there's still a lot of, I guess, unknown since it is a relatively newer disease. But we're at the point where we have enough field trials and screening available to us that we can start selecting more resistant material if it's available.
Some farmers are probably thinking, well, I've got tar spot. I'm also concerned about dawn and maybe a few other diseases. So, what's kind of an approach they can take when they're thinking about all of these things? And maybe we start with some background on dawn. You all are doing some research there. So, similarities and differences, and when that disease infects, what conditions it infects, the treatments, and how that may vary with managing tar spot as well.
Yeah, that's a great question because a caution I always have with tar spot is don't let it consume all of your attention and focus when you're developing that fungicide program for your corn. Don't forget about our other diseases, especially gibberella ear rot, and the fungus that causes that disease also produces the toxin DON or vomit toxin, which we all know is going to reduce the quality of that grain and really make it difficult to market that grain. So they both really prefer those cool, wet, humid conditions. Difference is infection timing. So for Gibberella, it's going to infect at that early green silk. It's going to enter through those silk channels and then infect that corn plant and cause ear rot symptoms later on in the season. And the caution I always warn growers is when you're determining that fungicide timing. So for example, if I'm using a single pass system, I'm only hitting that field once with a fungicide, then I urge, let's put something at green silk so we can also get Gibberella control. Right now, the two products labeled for Gibberella are Proline and Miravis Neo. And of those two, Miravis Neo could also provide foliar protection against diseases like tar spot. So trying to combat both with that single application, or if it works out on return on investment, doing that early silk application for Gib and then following it up at a later stage like R2 if you do have tar spot and other foliar diseases coming on strong.
Yeah, this is another one where that decision is so difficult to make to pull the trigger because a lot of times the symptomology that we're worried about doesn't show up until we've missed that ideal window. So I know we always tell growers to scout and hold off on pulling that trigger, but some of these newer diseases make that really difficult to not want to be preventative with that application timing.
Mhm. Yeah, and unfortunately, we've had really great support from the Ohio Corn Marketing Program. And so, similar to tar spot, we now have a risk forecast model for vomitoxins that was just released in the past week, and it lives in that same website dashboard, crop risk tool. And that's going to give you an idea of what your chances are of getting more than 1 part per million DON in that field. Just because, even more so with Gibberella ear rot, it's almost within a field different risk. You could have a low-lying spot, one adjacent to a woodlot that's really going to impact what that microclimate is. So that all goes into it. And it's easy for me to say this is exactly when you should apply that fungicide, but that's assuming you're making that application and not reliant on a custom applicator and dealing with those logistical challenges too.
So all of this is driven as much as possible by research. Folks across Ohio, directed by you, Dr. Pierce Paul, Jason Harch, who's been a big one as well, with tar spot and vomitoxin management. So let's talk a little bit about the scouting that you're spearheading for tar spot so we can get a better handle there.
Yeah, an exciting project that we're doing through the eFields on-farm research program is a tar spot surveillance survey. So multiple county educators are working with growers in their county to identify about 3 to 5 cornfields. And so they're monitoring those weekly at starting about V6. And this is giving us a sense of when is tar spot occurring, where is it occurring, and not just reporting if tar spot's there, but also at the end of the year, how severe was it? How common was it in that field? And then pairing that with some field management information like hybrid, fungicide program, etc. And I think that's going to give us a really wealth of information to start asking some Ohio specific questions with this disease.
Yeah, I'm really excited to dig in that data because it's, I think, going to give us the ability to look for patterns in management to see if we can't pinpoint some underlying causes that may increase your risk. And that information can be helpful when we're making future decisions, hopefully.
Absolutely. With the survey, I also have the maybe secret motive that the more we scout for it, the less there will be this year. But that's putting the grower hat on, not necessarily the researcher hat.
So far, that seems to be panning out because every week we're reminding educators to go out and look, and hardly anyone is finding it. So your theory might be holding up.
Until this episode's released and we have cooler weather and it just takes off. No.
Hey, it's a win-win either way. We'll either have severity across the state and get a really great data set and maybe unlock some of the mysteries for controlling it, or it won't exist because it's scared for us to learn about it.
The quickest way to manage disease is to put out a trial. So there we go.
So what are you guys doing with application of fungicides, gibberella research along those lines?
So we are continuing some work on fungicide application method and timing for gibberella ear rot. So that's also been supported by Ohio Corn and Wheat. One example is comparing a high clearance ground sprayer with a drone, and with that drone, different settings with that drone, and understanding how those two application methods differ as far as coverage. Coverage is critical for gibberella ear rot because we're trying to protect those silks. That's where infection's going to occur. But as we know, that's a hidden target in that cornfield. It's different than when we were talking about spraying a wheat field for fusarium, where that head is right at the top of the plant and an easier target to reach for that fungicide application. So comparing those two for spray coverage, as well as yield and disease protection. So we're doing that at two research stations, Western and Northwest. And then we also have some on-farm studies that are looking at that application method difference as well, either between that high clearance ground sprayer and a drone, or trying to add in an aerial application with an airplane.
Yeah, and it's never too early to plug our plots at Farm Science Review. So we will have some of the water sensitive paper you're using for those trials on display within our demonstration plots. If you're interested to come see how those compare when they were actually applied in the field, it's a pretty cool visual, I think.
Yes, Farm Science Review is going to be here before we know it. So that'll be a nice chance if you're coming out to the review to interact with us in those ag crops plots. We'll be featuring that research and others that's going on through the state.
So, Stephanie, with really some of the uncertainty around predicting our risk, I want to focus back on one of the most important tools that farmers can use is optimizing their hybrid selection to have a good defense up front against tar spot, vomitoxin, many of the diseases we're talking about. What information do we have that can help them with that decision?
So right now we're continuing the third year of doing a hybrid screening trial for gibberella ear rot and vomitoxin contamination. So this is really important because selecting that hybrid, like you said, is the most important step in that disease management plan for a producer. And the tricky thing about gibberella ear rot is doing those infield screenings and inoculating material. It's very labor intensive, and it can be a barrier to companies being able to screen their material. So this project's exciting in the sense that they can submit their hybrids that are released or just about to be released to the Ohio market. And then we screen them at multiple locations in field, both inoculated with that pathogen and uninoculated. And then evaluate those hybrids on how well did they control disease, and then also submit grain samples to capture those DON levels. So we've got results from both 2023 and 2024, and those are available online at go.osu.edu/vomitoxin. And then just today, they're inoculating some trials in North Central Ohio. So we'll have even more results for this 2025 season as well.
I just want to highlight, you've mentioned it a couple times. So much of the research that you guys are doing is supported by Ohio Corn and Wheat, which I think makes this podcast summary a really great example of how checkoff dollars are being focused on issues that are really important to farmers. So I just wanted to really highlight, it's really thanks to farmers and those farmer boards for making sure that we're focusing on this kind of research.
Yes, thanks for highlighting that again, Elizabeth. So Ohio Corn and Wheat has put a tremendous investment in this research, and we're really thankful for that. And I really think it's highlighted the vomitoxin issue on a national scale as well, and showing that it's not just affecting our region, it's affecting other states. And we want to get ahead of this problem. We don't want to get to a point where we've got an unmarketable product and facing those trade challenges with our end product. So very excited about that investment, and we're excited to get those results back to growers and show them what their checkoff money's doing.
Well, Steph, thanks for your time today, and thanks to you and the others working on this project, or these projects, I should say. We know it's a lot of work, labor intensive, going into corn when pollinating. Anyone who's done it knows it's not the most fun thing to do. So we appreciate it and we look forward to what you all will discover in the next few years.
Thanks, Amanda. Thanks, Elizabeth.
We'll put those links in the show notes for everyone, and keep an eye on your corn crop and let us know what you're seeing out in the field. Have a great day, everyone.
Thanks for listening to the Agronomy and Farm Management Podcast. Join us again in 2 weeks for our next episode.
Hey, podcast listeners. Just a reminder to give us a like or subscribe so you know when we release new episodes. If you're enjoying the podcast, be sure to leave us a review also. We appreciate the comments.